March 2023, like last year, 51 years ago, we had a similar event here. Exact location when I launched my earlier poetry collection, Epistles, Elegies, Imitations, now commonly called the Yellow Book, because the title is too long. Okay? So we had about 10-15 people here, and I tried my level best to get the same set today. Because after that event, the so-called Yellow Book went on to win the State Literary Award, right? So I want the same people here because I attributed it partly to their luck. But then I couldn't do it. So what I thought was I just handpicked a few others to substitute them, looking at their faces, whose faces carried a lot of luck in them, right? So I got them in. We have few people running late, but I thought we'll just get things going. They can always join us. So some of you were there at this event I referred to. A few things have changed. So for example, we had different orientation last time. We were using the depth of the space. So today we are this direction. And also I think if you remember towards the tail end of that program, Dilshan Boange started asking some very exciting questions. So to avoid that, this time I have got Dilshan Boange here, right? Who will actually have probably a preemptive strike. Kind of, yeah, right? So he has been given license to ask anything he wants, least about the book, but anything he wants, except one particular topic, which we have agreed not to discuss. And also with the knowledge that on the 29th of March, in about 5 days, I'll be in a panel where I'm talking to Dilshan Boange. So with that knowledge also, right? So Dilshan can basically ask anything. So this can go on for about 10-15 minutes. Then we can get other people involved, right, in the conversation. And then move on. Yeah. So for people who are new to Dilshan Boange, if there are such people, Dilshan Boange, I think, is a, well, octopus is not the best example, right? Who is in a few things at the same time, right? Including, he's got a training in law, he's got a literature background, a very strong literature background. But also he's kind of established himself as an arts critic, arts and literary critic, almost monopolizing entirely on his own the field of English drama. Dilshan Boange. He's also written a few books.
You might read the drama.
A few books including Consciousness, the Writer's Primary Pen, Consciousness, the Writer's Primary Pen, 2011, which is actually a fairly good, I don't know whether it was based on probably research you have done.
Some part.
Yes, it's actually one of fairly exhaustively studied, very well articulated series of essays on writing as a craft, but also largely anchoring on Kundera, if I remember, yes, right? Kundera, and others. Followed by textual tapestries, Ola Elshe.
Yeah, I think let's
refresh you, right? And most recently, the last latte. So he's been around and he's pretty much entrenched in the field. So I think in a way, pleasure to talk to Dilshan. Right.
I thought the focus was going to be on your work and the launching of this book. So getting into the task at hand, if I may call that, Vihanga, I think it's very pertinent that we focus on the fact that this book is of the genre that you are probably not the most prolifically known for, which is prose novel, I would say, because I would say generally you're known more as a poet than as a novelist, at least from what's out there in the press, especially I suppose considering that you won the creation for a collection of poetry. And since also what I've noticed is that your focus also has been largely when it comes to the Sri Lankan literary scene has to do with Sri Lankan poetry. So maybe I mean I don't know how fair it is, but perhaps the label has been put on you as being a person who's more focused and specialized when it comes to literature towards the genre of poetry. So in that respect, how do you see yourself as a writer between these two genres? Because now this is a novel, but I mean here again is the problem where we should have, or I should have clarified as to whether there was going to be a dedicated segment. I would have actually asked for a synopsis or some sort of summary about the book. So I've only had the opportunity of just getting a glimpse of this right now. So you say that this is it's narrated in multiple voices to several characters, but can each be taken as a standalone story, or how does it work?
Yeah. So no, I think this is largely probably 6 narratives.
5
narratives that more or less interlock one another. So, I mean, you can take them as standalone, but there are crucial overlaps, interlinkages, so on and so forth. A little bit about the background of the book. This is partly, I think, a book written over almost 2 years, which involved a certain degree of research, unlike some of the other fiction I have published. And it came as a part of a dissertation I had undertaken, high degree level. So part of the deal was that I had to produce something creative. This came out of that. Your earlier question about poetry and prose, well, I guess I've been producing in both genres more or less in tandem right from the start. And I just did a quick count. This the 18th book I have written. So out of that, I think there are about 6 novels, maybe 5 collections of poetry. So I'm still, I think, 34 short of Gina Alsanaga. I think 12 ahead of Ashok Ferida. I'm not competing necessarily, right? So I think, yeah, to answer your question, it's been like a even journey, but what you say is true. Some of the poetry has got, let's say, greater accreditation, that is the word. But I think that's also, there are different reasons why we kind of award books, right? There are different reasons for, it's on the side of reception mostly. So that I don't know why that has happened, but on my side, I think I kind of move easily between the two genres, so to speak. Yeah.
But Vihanga, when it comes to but still, how would you distinguish the two genres when you set your hand to the craft, right? Writing poetry or writing a poem and then writing a piece of prose? What makes you decide that this is going to be a poem and not a piece of prose, and what makes you think this is going to be a piece of prose and not a poem? Where do you draw the line when you set yourself to the task?
Now I'm sure the answer to this is in Dilshan Boange's book, Consciousness. I think it's there, the answer, but no, I think it's how it comes. It's how it comes. So very often, so people very often craft, or they work ideas into creative work. So I think it starts with the idea, and very often in my case, the most likely genre in which that idea can flourish or take flower comes alongside. So normally it happens, except in a very few instances where I have like the same thing in both forms.
Right.
That is there, but very few, like one or two. Actually, like I have a couple of long poems that I have later rewritten as stories, short stories, and also maybe a couple of stories that with I don't know, a lot of editing going in, I've been turning to poems, but that is the exception of the norm so much. So normally for me what happens is with the idea what should be the likely medium,
Right.
it comes. Yeah.
So with the idea the poem is also sort of coupled.
Sort of that, right, yes.
So when it comes to this book now, you would call this a novel, or would you call this a collection of short stories?
No,
A novel. So Vihanga, now when you look at the subject matter, the theme, how personally connected are you to it from a point of personal experience? Because I mean, we are just 1 year apart in terms of vintage. So now, what I remember of the what's called the vision is has a lot to do with what I heard from the adults or what I can remember. So it's mostly to do with what's now being said about it. Because we stayed at home a lot when we should have been going to school. That's what I remember mostly. So
yeah, so I think a footnote is required here. First of all, like what the book is about. So this is a novel set in the 87-90 period, the political emergency at the time. So this is largely the story of some of the violence arriving in two villages, right, adjacent villages, somewhere in Kandy. So that entire experience is mapped through, or it is framed by 5 people telling the story on hindsight. So it's like a retrospective recollection of things. Now, also the second thing is, as I said, this was a part of a bigger project where I did some research work related to narratives of torture survivors, political survivors of political torture, and adjacent to that I had to do something creative, and because this also involves memory and narrative, I kind of went for this kind of project. So now what you say is very important, right? What you say is very important because in my minor role as a literary critic, I pretty much spent a lifetime attacking people for doing what I have done, right? So,
including your story.
Sorry?
Including your story once upon.
Yes. So yeah, I get the point. So people who write novels or poems or whatever based on things which they don't kind of have the hang of, right? I'm talking about everyone, starting from Michael Ondache, Shyam Sebadue, right? Munavira, all of them in one basket. Shehan Karnadila, all in one basket, right? That's true. So now, okay, I've done a lot of groundwork for this, but I have to tell you that I've never brought in anyone else's story into the novel. So I've had to speak to people. I've visited people over 2 years with breaks. Tried in a bit to kind of acclimate myself to get a sense of that historical moment where we were spending time at home, as you said, right? But also based on that, I think looking for some co-essence in that interaction, I've brought all that into narrative, right? So I try to balance it that way. And also I think when you work on something for about 2 years, I think that gives you a chance to minimize your biases and your prejudices to kind of work through whatever that experience is. So I think I benefited a little bit from that also. But this one novel I never wanted to publish also. Like, as I was working on it, I had already decided that I'm not going to publish this ever. And I told this to the people who were supervising me at the time. And the reason is that same reason. This is not my story at the end of the day, right? And I felt there's a certain, let's say, a double standard in doing that. But then I think the decision to go ahead with this came in one of those moments, right? So basically, this was published by Boange, who has this very generous competition every year. They entertain manuscripts and best four they publish, right? So I have a certain soft spot for the establishment of Boange at another level. So a couple of years ago, I just put this in for the competition. It kind of made some headway, and then I just went ahead with it. Yeah.
So the story of the gunman, the one that's last on the twisted a person who actually wielded a gun, I think.
Yeah. So the 5 sections of the story, I said there are 5 people, more or less the same story, but different parts of a continuing experience. That is what they're narrating. So there is one subsection called a son, a brother, a mother, a friend, and the last section is subtitled a gunman. Actually, some of the material there influenced by conversations I've had with the mother of a guy who disappeared during that time. So who had charges of being, in rebellious or subversive activity. The mother thinks otherwise, but this is a guy who kind of, no one's heard anything of him in the last 30 odd years. We don't know whether he's alive or not. So in the process of things, I had the opportunity of meeting this woman, having conversation about that, the uncertainty the family went through. So I think some of the background to that story was culled that way. So into that I imported the gun. Yeah.
But this is not a subject that you feel, because, okay, what I'm trying to get at is, Vihanga, I've met certain writers, I mean, if I may say by name, if you take Perera Dilshan, for example, is a person who really focuses on that era and this particular moment in Sri Lanka colonial history, mainly I suppose because how he was affected by being a university student at the time. And it's almost like they, or rather his generation, they seem to consider it almost like some moral duty of theirs to try and highlight what they thought were the injustices through their craft. And they don't seem to be able to, I don't know, I mean from looking at it from different generation, I feel that they simply just don't seem to be able to get past it. They're just sort of, stuck in that, frozen in that trauma that I think that they seem to be romanticizing almost. I don't know how fair it is for me to say that they're sort of romanticizing the trauma, but again, as an outsider, as a person almost a generation removed, it's like they think that is the greatest story ever told, or rather the greatest story that hasn't been told, and they keep on going back to it. But do you at any point as a Sri Lankan who happened to be alive at that point, although certainly, I think, let's be honest, I don't think we can honestly say we were so directly impacted by the leftist the psyche as such, certainly not to the extent that maybe a youth, a teenage or a late teen or a person in his or her early 20s would have experienced. But looking at it from a point where it is an event that a lot of Sri Lankans don't think can easily be just put into the basket of history, as in terms of ancient history or history that is put into the history books, but a part of living memory. What do you feel about it? Do you think that there is some sort of onus on your part as a writer to sort of give credence to what was experienced by these people, or do you consider it as subject matter that you should deal with as a writer and do justice to your readers? Because I mean, this is my personal way of looking at it, because if you think of it in terms of a writer, I would say your readers would be your first the ones to whom you would have some sort of moral obligation to connect with. through your writing. But whether your subject felt any justice was done, I mean that's a whole other sort of maybe a can of worms, I don't know. So since this is since the leftist insurgency in Sri Lanka is not a subject that I've ever touched on, or maybe very frankly it's not something that has drawn my attention to and has fascinated me, intrigued me to that extent. So how do you look at it from a point of being a writer and a researcher when it comes to bringing out that story? Because you still can't disavow the fact that you are the writer who is standing there between the voice that told you the story and the reader who is going to be reading it.
So I'll just break into two parts to make it easy for me to answer. So whether there is a story to be told or a history to be conveyed, my feeling is yes, right? So I feel that even to this time and age, definitely in the English language literature, maybe a little bit different in the Sinhala sphere, right? What exists is a dominant, very dominant narrative of what happened in 87-90. So I think now 7 Moons of Mali Almeida, Shehan Kanatelaga is also dabbling in that area. But I think maybe most of us, pretty much metropolitan to some degree, privileged in so many different ways, I think we can't get beyond a certain wall, right? So I don't know, so you quoted P.L. Karyavasam's name, so maybe Karyavasam comes from a different subject position altogether. So my feeling is, look, there is a lot to be said, especially in the English language literature. In the Sinhala literature, I think from about 2000, the last, let's say 20-24 years, there are narratives emerging sporadically from different places, but there is an effort to kind of center that story in so many different ways. Not so much the English writing. So yes, but then again connecting with your question, I feel if I take myself as a person, right, writer, reader, whatever person, I have to kind of be very specific what my role is in that discourse as a whole. So that's why I said, maybe as a writer I'm not very comfortable trying to tell a story that's not mine. So what I have done when I've spoken to people, so the technical term is, they call it secondary witnessing. That's the technical. So I can make up my mind saying, okay, I'm being secondary witness. I'm speaking on behalf of a witness, right? But then again, if you remember, a few years ago, not few years ago, about 10 years ago, this book that became quite popular, Long Watch, Ajit Boyagoda, who tells the story to Sunila Galapathy, right? So I mean, when you read a Long Watch, one of the main questions that arises to readers is, so where does Galapathy end? Where does, so the demarcation line between the subject and the mediator. So there is one thing I was very careful when I was writing this. What part of the experience is something that I can't take ownership for, and it's not mine to narrate. So I need to I needed to, and I hope I grappled with that challenge at least to some degree of satisfaction where I am concerned, where I back away. So obviously this went through several drafts in the writing process. So some of the earlier drafts look very different from what came out in the end. There are entire sections that have been written over so many times. Some sections that I've left out altogether. Even the ordering of the story, it was a little bit different. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, it can be a story you have to communicate, but you have to internally have that discussion and decide what your subject position is in that overall thing. So, yeah.
But you don't feel that as a writer, you are not going to represent this topic, this subject, this stage of Sri Lanka's political history. You don't believe to that extent, that as a writer you would be a person who can represent that.
No, with limitations, yes, but not in the same sense. Not in the same sense as someone who has like been 11 months in a torture camp, like Ajit Tarakum Jayasingh, who wrote this book K Point 5 years ago, based on his torture experience in a notorious torture camp in Mathura district, right? There is great ownership, there is undisputable ownership, right? So, and there are other debates there also. So, this guy writes his autobiography, then there are others who say, look, you are not as clean as you claim.
Right.
That's a different debate, right? So, no, yeah.
So then going further into that, Vihanga, how much of this should the younger generations look upon as a voice from from the actual past, or containing kernels of history? What are your thoughts on that? Or should they just take this as fiction and just leave it?
Yeah, I'm not very serious about these things. So, I mean, what they would take, if they buy a couple of books, that will be helpful. But how they really digest it, it's really up to them. I'm not very serious about those things at that level, right? I mean, there can be things we can, there can be things in a book that generates interest, that makes us rethink about our own immediate history, our legacies, and so on. So I'm sure there is something here that might stimulate people in that way.
Because fiction does leave an impression sometimes about how certain stage was back in the day, and which can't be accessed anymore due to perhaps lack of people with living memory and so on. And then it's always what's to be found as a textual source that can give some sort of glimpse into what had been.
Yeah, but I hope whatever narratives there are in the world of fiction, I really hope that this kind of unlocks a different experience, because I've done a fair bit of thinking where the writing is concerned. And I also hope my own background, because I have an interest in conflict-related literature, especially in Sri Lanka. So more to do with the Northeast civil conflict, but also southern conflicts. So I think with that background also coming in, I hope that there is a different window unlocked with this. Yeah.
So talk about conflict. Did the separatist conflict have a very strong impact on you as to what you should write about as a writer? Growing up in an era where there was a 30-year war going on.
Again, it's the same thing. Now, as you said, in relation to 87-90, so there was this event happening, but it depends to what degree it touches our lives, right? So I've seen my friends writing SOPs, right? Statements of purpose, to get admitted to foreign universities, where they talk about Sri Lanka, this war-torn country, and how their lives are not affected, but it was around them, right?
People who are from Kenya.
Right? I mean, like, we are talking about the occasional bomb, which is in essence retaliation, right? And we are trying to compare this with war as a daily reality for 30 years, right, in another part of the country. So I haven't really kind of felt that it's my place, but then there are other meaningful ways in which you can be a part of the discourse, which I have explored.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think there is also something of an expectation when it comes to, I don't know, to say specifically like overseas leaders alone, but at least people from overseas who now get a taste of Sri Lanka as a post-war country, they wonder what was it like growing up in a country where there was a war. I mean, I've been actually asked that, and to be honest, I said, well, the thing is, we actually saw the war on TV, read about it in the papers, and the only thing that really affected us directly during our school days was when there was a suicide bombing somewhere in Colombo, and school would be closed for a couple of days. So that's the truth. Unless, of course, you have somebody in the army, some close family member in the army, then that could be different.
You mean the truth living here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then I had a very different sort of true-to-life experience of how the war affected the school-going child, when I got sure you all would have heard of Guru Perera, Kumar Padiyar Guru Perera. He was contemporary he was in the law faculty at the time that I was in the art faculty, and I met Guru a couple of times, and he had told a friend of ours, you all really don't know what difficulties are. I mean, to the extent that y'all the school children who grew up eating hamburgers and drinking Coca-Cola, something to that extent, and said, whereas they were, at night they were, fearing for their lives and trying to figure out if they have to run to a bomb shelter or someplace like that in case that they would come in the get caught up in the crossfire. So I mean that was something where you say, where you can justify, where a voice needs to be brought out through the discourse of the arts. But when this expectation of a voice from an era of conflict or a zone of conflict, or whatever you want to call it, is sort of called upon by audiences outside of that geography, usually there is, usually, not always, usually there is a person with that status of agency. I think that's the best way of putting it. Who comes up and says, yes, this was what it is, and then you find those essays being written, I come from a war-torn country and all those things. So in that context, have you ever felt that I can write a good novel about the 83 scenario and then going up to the 30-year war, and maybe that might grab the attention of a lot of people outside of Sri Lanka?
No, but that's also like the pressure of the market, right? That's the pressure created by the market, right? That is one kind of writing, and there are writers who do that. And these are also the writers in whose work there is a lot of dissonance in terms of space, in terms of time, right? Spatio-temporal dissonance. So this is what happens when, I won't go into names, like let's say someone with a Sri Lankan background but living in, let's say, the UK from the 1960s onwards, trying to write about the Sri Lankan political context. You very often find that they speak in terms of images that are fossilized in time. They don't ring true to your time. So that is what happens when you go with the market. So part of my writing, I would say all the time, but more true to more recent times. I've been trying to avoid that corporatized mentality, right? So for example, there's this very slim poetry collection out there which I published a couple of weeks ago. Deliberately, I'm trying to distance myself from that corporatized poetry publishing culture at so many different levels. So I can tell the story separately, right? So my writing has been at a different level. So I don't operate at that level. But people who operate at that level, what they're doing, I understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. So especially within my immediate ilk group, the same criticism is there about Vihanga, what he has done with 7 Moons of Malayalnera, people who can compare it with Chinaman, right? In terms of the politics, it tries to frame, it tries to bring out. So then if you check where this literature is produced, where it is circulated, what kind of reading circles it delivers, I think all the dots can be lined up to a very comfortable and very well established literary market where there is transnational, right? So and also you yourself as a critic might have observed that people coming from Africa, Asia, what we call the Middle East, this is like a literary subgenre itself. Very often first novels written by people coming from these areas. So that is how people like Arundhati Roy, downwards Kiran Desai, right? All of them actually made a big splash, and for some of them, just one novel is enough, right? For 20 years, right? So right, yeah. So I write at a different level. Yeah.
So in that sense, Vihanga, do you see yourself as a chronicler of your, I mean, for the lack of a better word, your era of growing up, of experiencing, of observing, and wanting to give expression to what you internalize? Because I remember Aslam Marikanya, your peer and how do I say, fellow in the arts from Kandy, if I put it that way. When I after reading, I think it was the Black Book.
Okay, the Black Book. Yeah.
Sorry, can you?
Bodies in Art.
Bodies in Art. Mm-hmm. Sorry. So in Bodies in Art, there was some mention of a master from Trinity. Was it who was walking along a path or who went missing? No, it was a Marika. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some gentleman. So I checked with Aslam whether there was some connection, and he said no. And he said Vihanga internalizes a lot of people that he meets in and around Kandy, and he brings them out through his work. So that seems a lot like a way of chronicling, of maybe capturing what you experienced as a writer, or what you observed as a person, and what you're trying to give a voice to as a writer, perhaps to capture what is fleeting, because time is something that every artist has to cope with and try to work through and work with.
Yeah, so the Marika in that book, it's a reference to Mr. S.M.L. Marika, who taught classics at Perera Dilshan.
Right.
He was, I think, Gunadilaka Prize judge some time ago. Lecture Gunadilaka Prize judge. So Mr. Marika, actually, I think he kind of he went missing and he was found dead later. So the reference is to him. Just remembered in my life for giving me 2 C's when I was in the second year. I write a lot about things I can connect with, things that I can relate to, things that are around me. So there's a very strong, very powerful, and I don't try to deny this, biographical element in what I write. So I don't write so much as to chronicle with that idea in mind, but it happens. So even the poetry I write, it's a lot to do with what's going on in or around me at the time. So the Black Book, so-called, it's a book I wrote about 4 years ago, Bodies in Art. So it's written as a biography of the Kandy art scene, Kandy drama and art scene, and the Colombo art scene over 15 years. So there's a lot of, it's by, I think, through purpose it is biographical, right? So I think, yeah.
The social scene also, I mean, not just the art scene, because I don't see you sort of compartmentalizing.
No, I think they're pretty much the same. One is an extension of the other, right?
Because I was quite surprised to see you talking about rugby matches and.
We are encroaching on forbidden topics.
Like what?
People I meet at rugby matches. So
yeah.
So no, you're right, because most of the people, we are more artists in society than on stage, right? That happens. So it kind of is an extension either way. So you're right there, yes.
What about now opening up the house for?
Sure, we can do that, right? We can have a conversation, right? Conversation. And while a question comes, I'll probably speak a few words about this poetry collection also, right? This was meant to be for this, but then last week I think I managed to press some poetry, a book called The Lavinia Poems and Aphrodite's Child. So this is a collection of 26 poems. It's very slim. It's the perfect body we all want to have, but we have given it up long since, right? So largely consisting of a series of poems I wrote across 2023, which went really well with people following me on social media. There was a lot of, unlike ever before, I've been writing for, I don't know, the last 18 years. Never happens. People don't like say anything. People don't have any ideas to share with me, but a lot was told. And then I thought maybe I should like get this into a small collection, because it's also the kind of poetry I'm very sure in another year I won't be doing anything with it. So it's the kind of poetry I know I will grow out of. So I actually got it printed through this very small press in Kandy, who actually does my day-to-day printing, work-related stuff, of whom I'm very fond of, that printer. So I just went up to him and asked, can you do this kind of thing? He said, sure, let's go ahead. And so he's printing with very primitive machinery. He hasn't got the machinery jam fruit tree publishers have, right? But he's done a good job. And I got a few copies for people who are interested. It goes in 2 sections. Section 1 is called the Lavinia poems. Section 2, Aphrodite's Child.
So not going to read?
No. So if you don't have anything, that's fine. We can still hang out. The whole idea is to just meet, have a chat, right? We can also take questions informally. That's fine. So look, before we close, I need to thank a few people, right? I need to thank Manik and Anushan, Paw Print publishers, but I think they are doing this more as friends, giving me the space and also giving all of us, especially Brune, coffee on the house, right? This space, they call it Nook On Lily, right? It's not called Lily on the Nook, as I have mentioned in the invitation I sent you, right? It's called, so I thought, okay, they're going to throw me out after this, but they've been very decent about it. So, especially Brune Coffee, courtesy of Nook On Lily, and there is cake, courtesy of Fish Baker. For which I had paid. So, Fish Baker's cake. And we can spend time, have a chat, right? Some people I'm meeting after 4th of March 2023, 51 weeks ago. So we can spend some time together, right? But I really, really appreciate it, you guys coming today. It's a long weekend also. And our collective luck, we will have a good assessment of it, how far the book goes by next year, right? So fingers crossed on that as well. Thank you.
All the best for another nomination.